This is a story that took place more than 2,000 years ago in one of the most advanced civilizations in the world. It tells of a young king who came to rule a great empire. His name was Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China. He was a brilliant strategist. He conquered all of ancient China, and to this day, it bears his name. But there are no eyewitness accounts of what the most powerful man of the ancient world was like. Almost everything we know about him comes from a chronicle written a century after Qin's death. In this chronicle, the writer Sima Qian tells how hundreds of thousands of people suffered to build the emperor a huge mausoleum, an underground palace guarded by an army of clay. He also describes a determined attempt on Qin's life. But this monarch feared only one adversary, death, and believed that death too could be defeated. His new empire was supposed to be eternal. It ended in chaos, but the legend and the mystery of his tomb survived. China, 206 BC. Rebel forces break into the chambers where the first emperor was laid to rest just 4 years ago. These same rebels are already in the process of reducing the Qin Empire to ashes. Now they invade the empire of the afterlife. In their fury, they destroy symbols of the decades of slavery their first emperor made them suffer. For more than 2,000 years afterwards, this site lies hidden. Then, in 1974, a group of farmers looking for water come across a few fragments of terracotta. An archaeological dig begins, and today, in the Xi'an region, a hall as big as an aircraft hangar contains the result. What the scientists discovered was a gigantic army in clay, complete with chariots and war horses, infantry, officers and archers, all life-sized and drawn up in rank and file, as many as 8,000 figures in total. Each figure is unique, with each face showing a perfectly modeled, distinct individual. Putting together what the rebels broke apart is a huge task, a giant puzzle that will take generations to complete. Some of the figures were smashed into as many as 200 pieces. Few hands or heads remain undamaged. So far, 1,000 figures have been restored and about 150 more stand next to the pit, awaiting completion. No one knows how many others still lie buried. But that's not the only mystery surrounding the terracotta army. For a long time, no one knew what the army was for. Eventually, the answer was discovered. The clay army guarded the entrance to the imperial burial chamber. camp formed just a small part of the entire burial complex. The army's chambers lay 1.5 kilometers east of the emperor's burial mound. The area of the mausoleum covers 2.5 square kilometers. Archaeologists believe that there are at least 160 underground chambers still to be discovered, and with no records, there is no way to tell what they might contain. In this inner precinct, they know huge palaces once stood, and behind them, the mausoleum itself. But the contents of the burial mound are the biggest secret of all. The emperor went to enormous lengths to ensure that no details would leak out, and for more than 2,000 years, no one has seen inside. But now, archaeologists are closing in on the most secret part of the site. Duan Qingbo of the Jianzi Archaeology Institute has spent years examining the area around the burial mound. Recently, he made a disturbing discovery. In a pit close to the mausoleum, instead of finding the pottery fragments he'd expected, he found human bones. At first, it was thought that this could have been a cemetery for the local farmers. But the evidence and the location argued against that. Duan suspected that there was a connection with the emperor's grave. As work continued, more than 100 skeletons were salvaged from the pit, and a thorough forensic examination was set in motion.
The analysis of the bones showed that these men were between 20 and 30 years old when they died. Most of them were undernourished. In addition, the bones had been scattered about and we didn't find any funerary articles. That makes me think that they were building workers, working on the mausoleum. And one more thing, many of the skulls have fractures. These men didn't die a natural death. They were probably executed.
Each of these skulls once belonged to a workman. So what happened to them all 2,000 years ago? They were all men, like this one we'll call Cao Zhou, still in the grey work clothes he was wearing the day the soldiers came and dragged him from his home. Cao Zhou is one of 700,000 slaves building the emperor's mausoleum. Once in his service, they know they are expendable. The guards force the pace from sunrise to sunset. The slaves' only hope of freedom is to complete the task. When the emperor makes a tour of inspection of the place he believes will guarantee him immortality, the guards beat the workers to the ground. Even the smallest misdemeanors are savagely punished. Cao Zhou knows that one such misdemeanor is to look at the emperor's face. But he thinks if the guards are also averting their eyes, then no one will notice. This will be his only chance to look at the man who has caused him so much suffering and who alone can decide his fate. The emperor is born in 259 BC as a prince of the small kingdom of Qin. There will later be questions about the legitimacy of his claim to the throne. His mother was once a concubine of the kingdom's prime minister, and it's possible that they are still lovers. The prince may be their son, and not of royal blood at all. The mystery surrounding the first emperor's lineage may never be resolved. But his rise to power will seal the fates of both his mother and the prime minister. At the age of 13, the boy ascends to the throne of the Kingdom of Qin. He's determined to lead the kingdom to unprecedented glory and to unite all China under its flag. China's unification becomes his lifelong obsession. The Prime Minister and the boy's mother give him their full support in this most grave of undertakings. But until the young king comes of age, it's the Prime Minister himself who will run the country, along with the court officials. The Prime Minister has been a successful businessman, and he uses a similar business-like approach with the government. He introduces an efficient tax system, encourages manufacturing and trade, and leads the small kingdom of Qin to prosperity. But in doing so, he creates an economic base for war. In the China of 2,300 years ago, many small kingdoms are vying for supremacy. Of the 7 most powerful, Qin is spared the worst of the conflict because of its formidable natural defenses. But in 230 BC, when the king is 29, the Qin armies are prepared for battle. The moment has been well chosen. Over the centuries, the other kingdoms have worn each other down. Their armies are now exhausted and their losses huge. Their people long for peace. Nonetheless, the king leaves nothing to chance. With military force, he triumphs over the other kingdoms. It is this mighty army that was recorded in terracotta. First came 3 rows of crossbowmen, the artillery of their day. Then came chariots, wheeled war machines, each drawn by 4 war horses. It was from these that the officers commanded their troops. In their wake came the infantry, marching in ranks of 4. Their features were masks of determination and cruelty that made them the most feared warriors of their day. The special units flanking each chariot carried lances up to 6 meters long. In close combat, they were to protect the chariots at all costs from enemy attack. But the most effective weapon in the Emperor's arsenal was the crossbow. With a range of up to 800 meters, it could destroy the enemy's ranks without the need for hand-to-hand combat. Chronicles tell of endless swarms of arrows darkening the sky as they arced into enemy territory. During the course of their excavations, archaeologists discovered a whole arsenal of weapons next to the terracotta army. And astonishingly, they were in perfect condition, with no sign of decay. Was it something in the earth that had conserved the metal, or something in the metal itself? Examinations revealed that Qin armourers had perfected an anti-corrosion process, unknown in Western countries until the 20th century. This chromium-plated sword is one of thousands of identical pieces forged by the Qin craftsmen more than 2,000 years ago. They worked with a precision unheard of in Europe at that time. Trigger mechanisms and arrows for the crossbows were manufactured in serial production lines. These massive arrowheads had fearsome penetrating power. The effect they would have had on the enemy forces is obvious. The Qin military machine was deployed with just one aim: to attack. The Roman census in 225 BC counted 800,000 troops available to defend that empire, but the King of Qin has an army of more than 1 million soldiers at his disposal. Numerous towns are besieged. Bravery is prized above all, and the penalty for cowardice is summary execution. The Qin army is described as setting upon its enemies like a dog hunting a crippled hare. The King of Qin's revolution claims more than 2 million lives. The old feudal order, with its concept of honor and mercy, has passed into history. Qin's officers earn promotion through success on the battlefield, not through family status. Bring me the head of an enemy soldier and you will advance by 1 rank, is the maxim by which Qin soldiers are trained and by which they live and fight. Prisoners of war now face execution, which usually means being buried alive. If the accounts can be believed, in one battle alone, 400,000 enemy soldiers are dispatched in this way. People in China today still can't agree whether the ends justified the means. For some people, the King of Qin was the cruelest of despots. But others see him as the father of the nation, the man who swept away the feudal states with a single stroke. In just 5 years, the Tiger of Qin, as he is soon called, has conquered 3 neighboring states. The fall of the Kingdom of Yan seems to be only a matter of time. Yan sends an envoy to the Qin court as a sign of submission. He is to hand over a map of the kingdom. But the envoy has a secret purpose: assassination. Believing him to come in peace, the palace guards let him pass. But now, the king has no one to protect him, because inside the palace, only he is allowed to bear arms. The envoy knows he won't necessarily be able to get close enough to the king to strike. But to his fortune, the king decides to revel in his triumph and receive and inspect the map himself. All the envoy needs now are steady nerves and a steady hand. Now the envoy from Yen, like his country, has no hope of escape. And the king, the only armed man in the palace, tastes his victory in person. Whether by luck or destiny, the King of Qin has survived, now more certain than ever that his mission is to complete the unification of China. Within 6 years, the remaining kingdoms are all under his control. By 221 BC, China is one under the Qin flag. The King of Qin is now crowned Emperor of China. This is bad news for the slave workers at the mausoleum. Work started on the site more than 20 years before, when the 13-year-old king first came to the throne, and it's still not finished. And now, new orders arrive from the palace. The newly crowned emperor's realm of the dead must be bigger and more imposing than any structure ever built by man. For Cao Zhou and the other workers, this is a disaster. The vague hope of seeing their homelands and their families again is all that's been keeping them alive. The emperor also orders the construction of an army in terracotta. Artists from all over China are recruited to do the work. Some make hands, others hair, and still others badges of rank. Heads, arms, legs and trunks are made separately, then joined together, like life-size construction kits. This is the only way it's possible to create figures in sufficient numbers. When they're completed, each figure is painted. 2,000 years later, there's little trace left of the colouring. The figures are very sensitive to changes in humidity, and from the moment the statues are uncovered, the paint begins to flake and blister away. For years, nothing could be done to preserve them. But then experts from the Bavarian State Department of Historical Monuments offered their help. They succeeded in developing a process to stop the paint peeling from the figures. Now, whenever a figure is uncovered, it is treated with a fluid to stop it drying out. Then, in the workshop, a chemical substance is applied that penetrates into the lacquer. The substance is used 3 times in increasing concentration to stabilize the paint, a process that takes about 10 days. But how did the freshly painted statues originally look? Katharina Blensdorf has analysed the pigments and reconstructed the colour schemes, and her hand-painted studies are the basis for a unique experiment. Her colleague, Felix Horn, scans a kneeling terracotta archer with a laser to create a 3D image of the clay figure, a grid on which the vivid original colours can be virtually painted. The ancient artists used precious minerals like malachite and vermilion in their paints, but they also mixed their own compounds using processes unknown in Europe. The result is a warrior that looks almost living and breathing. And that was precisely the intention. The emperor also wanted music in the afterlife. So a clay orchestra was created, probably including instruments that have since disintegrated. And he would have needed administrators and scholars. They too were constructed with writing materials around their waist. These figures were recently found in a chamber 900 meters from the Emperor's pyramid. They had been placed in small underground niches set into the walls. But when they turned a corner, the archaeologists discovered something even more incredible. A long, narrow chamber containing a complete river landscape of cranes, swans, and geese beside an artificial stream. These figures were made of bronze, not clay. There's nothing like them anywhere else in the world, and to this day, no one knows how they were cast. The realm of the dead was a reflection of the living world. This is a traditional Chinese way of looking at things, but no other ruler would ever come close to portraying this ancient idea so meticulously and on such a scale. Yet, according to Sima Qian's chronicle, the emperor's contemporaries have little good to say of him. They describe him as having the heart of a tiger and thinking nothing of eating others alive. The Tiger of Qin has destroyed the old order. But he's now faced with a far greater task. To consolidate his power, he has to institutionalize unity. One method he employs is to decree the unification of weights and measures. This 32-kilogram bronze weight becomes a standard measure used throughout the empire, as do these corn scoops. The words on the side threaten forgers with the death penalty. The next step is currency reform. From this point on, only round copper coins will be legal tender, a rule that will last until the 20th century. And finally, there's the written word. Previously, there were 6 different pictograms for horse. In unified Qin, there will be just one. This may all seem like common sense, but in fact, it's a revolutionary break with Chinese tradition. The aim of calligraphy was to attain a harmonious union of body and spirit. Writing was a spiritual exercise, a way to a higher goal. But under the emperor's rule, writing is reduced to a tool used primarily to serve the efficient administration of the empire. Unity becomes the leading idea in every aspect of life. Everything should be the same, everywhere. The individual kingdoms had long built barriers to protect their borders. But the Emperor of Qin extends them into the greatest defensive barrier the world has ever seen, the Great Wall. Remains of the 2,000-year-old structure can still be seen. The huge towers and ramparts were built mainly of rammed earth, lined with stone blocks. The wall stretches across the landscape for more than 5,000 kilometers. A giant dragon guarding the northern frontier. The emperor works on the wall for more than 10 years, and the emperor's subjects pay the price. Compulsory work details are extended and taxes increased as much as 3,000%. People who don't pay the taxes are condemned to slave labor, but even this can't satisfy the huge need for workers for the emperor's projects. At the mausoleum, Cao Zhou sees more and more prisoners arrive. Hundreds of thousands of people lose all their rights. The slave workers are branded with the mark of the criminal. This makes escape pointless. The shame of their fate is permanently written on their faces. Traditional order was based on the teachings of Confucius, who taught that a ruler should persuade with wisdom and moral power, not through force and cruelty. But the Emperor of Qin orders that all Confucius writings and every history book be destroyed. He wants the past expunged from the nation's consciousness. But beyond the printed word, the Emperor fears what's in the minds of men. He finds a reason to arrest and execute 460 scholars, a crime that, above all others, has remained seared in the nation's memory. The Emperor's ambitious advisors had informed him that the scholars and their beliefs threatened his search for immortality. In the old kingdom of Qin, the Prime Minister prevented the advisors from having too much influence over the ruler. But the Emperor-to-be had discovered that the Prime Minister was plotting against him. The Prime Minister was banned from court and sent into exile with no return. The banishment is a warning to anyone who might dare to turn against the ruler. The Prime Minister had initially been the architect of the realm. He is now the victim of his own grand design. Qin's greatest statesman sets off into exile, dressed as a simple peasant. And it's still possible that the man who has punished him so severely is his own son. The Prime Minister can't bear to see the collapse of everything he had worked for. He commits suicide in exile. But without the old Prime Minister's tempering influence, tyranny and oppression now have free rein. The ruler even accuses his mother of taking part in a conspiracy against him and puts her under house arrest. This too is a political act that crushes the traditional values of the ancestors. For according to Confucius, respect for one's parents is the foundation stone of a harmonious community. And he who violates this law calls forth chaos and doom. But there is no place for criticism in this empire. Dissenters are executed and put on public display. However, the ghostly calm achieved through this state terror is deceptive. Eventually, the Emperor has asked too much of his people. Too many wrongs have been committed, and too much blood has flowed. In every province of the empire, there are uprisings. At first, the army is able to put them down, but as soon as unrest is quelled in one region, it bursts out in another. The Emperor of Qin can no longer trust his own people, and he withdraws to his palace in fear. Even there, he no longer feels truly safe. His paranoia knows no bounds, and only his closest advisors are allowed to know where he is. But he fears one enemy above all others: death. The earlier assassination attempt still haunts him. But as Emperor, he feels he is entitled to godly powers and immortality. Alchemists from every corner of the empire respond with promises of an elixir of life. This proves to be a lucrative business, as the Emperor is willing to spend whatever it takes to cheat death. With very little to distinguish one product from another, the canny alchemists try to outdo each other in presentation, using dramatic demonstrations to peddle their magical broths and compounds. But of all the wondrous things they present to the Emperor, none can compete with a mysterious liquid that, it's said, can be turned into gold: mercury. It's highly likely that the Emperor consumed the poisonous substance in one form or another. But mercury is also relevant in another context. According to Sima Chen's chronicle, the Emperor's grave is a glowing, highly toxic chamber flowing with the fluid metal. Within the burial chamber, he writes, all the country's streams were reproduced in quicksilver and by some mechanical means made to flow into a miniature ocean. If there was once a sea of mercury under this hill, then where is it now? Archaeologist Duan Qingbo is skeptical. The chronicle was written 100 years after the Qin dynasty, so how could the writer have known what was inside the burial mound? But nonetheless, Duan has decided to investigate. If the chronicle is right, there must still be traces of mercury here. High on the mound, his team pushes bamboo rods into the earth. Duan takes samples every 5 meters to a depth of about 50 meters. He hopes that the varying thicknesses of the layers of earth will tell him something about the construction of the mausoleum. A week later, the results come back from the lab. Duan lays them over a plan of the burial mound. The results are astonishing.
Sima Chan's chronicle says that the first emperor's mausoleum contains the rivers and lakes of the empire filled with mercury. And look at this, in the middle of the hill there really is more mercury present. The levels are 100 times higher than in the surrounding areas. So Sima Chan's description really seems to be true.
And Duan's continuing work at the site reveals more. He now believes that there are 4-step pyramids beneath the mound, and between them, at a depth of about 50 meters, there is a massive block of stone. Perhaps this is the cover of the Emperor's burial chamber. The final chapter in the story begins in 210 BC, during one of the Emperor's journeys through his empire. He claims that this journey is a tour of inspection, but his real aim is to search the country for the elixir of immortality. The Emperor doesn't travel light. He's accompanied by 60,000 soldiers. but not one of his subjects ever sees him. He's always hidden inside a closed coach, one of many identical coaches in the huge imperial entourage. Few people ever know which of them is carrying the Emperor. A model of this coach was found near the Terracotta Army, an exact, scaled-down replica, delicately worked in bronze, gold and silver. The coach can only be opened from the inside, and two tiny windows are the only source of fresh air. The Emperor's coach is little more than a gilded cage. One summer's night, there is a sudden flurry of activity in the Emperor's camp. The sublime Emperor of Qin is dead. The chief eunuch immediately dismisses the guards from the Emperor's coach. The current Prime Minister arrives, and the two men begin to put a plan into action. They hand a sealed document to a messenger, supposedly the Emperor's will. But in fact, it's a forgery written by the chief eunuch and the Prime Minister. Both are part of a small clique of officials now plotting to dispose of the Crown Prince and instate his infant brother as Emperor instead. In order to do this, they need to keep news of the Emperor's death a secret for as long as possible. But on the journey back to the capital, this becomes increasingly difficult. The corpse begins to stink, and to hide the smell of decay, the conspirators order a new wagon to join the procession. A wagon loaded with rotten fish. It's an undignified end for the Emperor who intended to live forever. (210 BC sees the funeral of China's first emperor. The sublime Emperor of Qin is accompanied by a mighty procession. He will soon be committed to eternal life in an empire of clay, surrounded by his possessions. The Emperor's death meant the end of an era, but his works have lived for millennia. The Qin Empire may have been long lost to history, but the people of China today view the sumptuous treasures he left with a mixture of pride and admiration. More than 200 emperors followed the first emperor of Qin, all of them absolute rulers, and all of them detached from the people. On the orders of the emperor that succeeds him, any of the first emperor's concubines who have borne him no children must follow their lord into the tomb. The doors are then sealed forever. To reconstruct the burial chamber, archaeologists still depend on the chronicle of Sima Qian. A single tunnel leads into the palace. From the arched ceilings, stars twinkle, illuminated by the glimmer of oil lamps along the walls. The emperor lies in the center of his realm, surrounded by rivers and lakes of mercury. It's a portrait of his claim to universal power, even after death. No one knows how many people worked, suffered, and died to build the emperor's mausoleum. And no one knows their names. Perhaps one of them was called Cao Zhou. At the end, Cao Zhou and his companions in suffering are forced to follow the first emperor to their death. No one can be left alive to reveal the secrets of the burial chamber. There is no monument to Cao Zhou, but his labour lives on in the faces of thousands of clay soldiers. The Terracotta Army was created to defend the emperor's grave against his enemies. Just 4 years after his death, that grave lay in ruins. But the army did succeed in fulfilling his deepest wish. It made him immortal.